Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. I'm really excited to bring you today's video. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's get started. In 2006, off the coast of West Africa, a disaster was unfolding in the depths of the ocean. The Sunken 4, a vital trade ship operating in the waters of West Africa, was a sturdy vessel used for transporting fuel to oil platforms, providing maintenance, and offering other logistical services. However, on that fateful day, something completely unexpected happened, and the ship was swept into a disaster. In November 2006, the Sunken 4 was sailing off the coast of Nigeria, severely impacted by terrible weather conditions. Huge storms and waves were causing the ship to dangerously tilt. The crew had experience battling even the toughest weather, but this time the wave that hit them was extraordinarily large. This massive wave caused the ship to capsize and rapidly take on water. At that moment, the crew members aboard were trying to communicate with another ship that was also in danger, but nothing could save them from the disaster. The ship sank in seconds. The giant wave flipped the ship and filled it with water, causing the Sunken 4 to rapidly sink into the depths of the ocean. The ship flipped upside down, and everything, including the crew, was thrown into the water. Harrison O'Keefe was in the kitchen at the time preparing food. Other crew members were engaged in various tasks, but the world changed in an instant. Harrison was startled as everything went dark, finding himself still in the kitchen. As the ship capsized, those who were in the kitchen area were luckier than the others. While water rapidly filled the rest of the ship, the kitchen area was one of the last parts to be reached by water. Harrison could never forget the fear and panic he experienced in that moment. In just a few seconds, he realized the ship had flipped and was sinking into the depths of the ocean. Other crew members, suddenly thrown into the water, tried to save themselves. However, after the ship flipped, the chaos offered no chance for survival. As parts of the ship sank, others quickly filled with water. The storm and waves caused the interior of the ship to be completely dark. All Harrison could think about was survival, but even understanding the situation was a struggle. It was only a matter of time before the water would fill every corner of the ship. Harrison had found a temporary refuge in the kitchen. Fearing that the other crew members may have perished, he remained in that confined space. There was no exit, and no one else was visible. As time passed, surrounded by fear and despair, he didn't know what to do. There was no way out, and he had to rely on his survival instinct. As the ship sank, the water level quickly rose, but somehow, the kitchen area Harrison was in didn't fully fill with water. While many other crew members perished, O'Keefe did everything he could to survive in that tiny, dark space. The oxygen was running out and darkness enveloped everything, but somehow he kept going. Indeed, this was a miracle. Many people would think survival in such a situation was impossible. But Harrison O'Keefe managed to survive this disaster. The terror he experienced as the ship sank and plunged into the deep ocean was indescribable. But one thing was certain: he was strong enough to survive. The terrifying events Harrison O'Keefe faced didn't end with the ship sinking. The real struggle began as the sunken ship descended further into the ocean depths, and his battle for survival turned into an almost prison-like experience. After the ship capsized, the dark ocean waters rapidly flooded every part of the ship. Giant waves, driven by the storm, flooded every corner of the vessel. Because Harrison was in the kitchen, he was in the least affected area during the capsize. The kitchen became the only place where the water didn't fully reach, allowing for some oxygen and a chance to survive, but only for a short time. After the shock of the ship sinking, Harrison's first thought was to escape. But within seconds, he realized how serious the situation was as the ship plunged deeper into the ocean. The interior of the sunken ship was rapidly being submerged and the water level was rising steadily. Harrison was trapped in the corner of the kitchen area, fighting for his life in a space just a few square meters. In that narrow and dark space, the oxygen that had accumulated in the water began to deplete over time. Harrison had to do everything he could to survive in this environment. The ship was completely dark, and the only sounds around him were the roar of the ocean and the occasional creaking of metal. He struggled to prevent more water from entering, but it was not an easy task. When the ship capsized, some oxygen remained in the kitchen, but it didn't last long. Harrison had only a few hours of oxygen, and to survive, he had to use every available resource around him as efficiently as possible. The first day was like a nightmare. He had no idea how much time had passed. In that isolated space, there was nothing but the sound of water and darkness. Everything was silent, but the silence was terrifying. He was trapped in such a confined area that moving became almost impossible. If he didn't manage to stop the water from entering, his chances of survival would decrease even further. But dealing with this struggle alone was extremely difficult. In that few square meters of space, Harrison relied on his survival instincts and fought a tough battle. At first, he watched where the water was entering and tried to stop it, his biggest fear. As he noticed the water level rising from time to time, he tried to stay still in that narrow space and controlled every movement of his body very carefully. In those moments, he could only act on instinct. While the ship was sinking, he was lost in the ocean, but there was still a small area of survival left in the kitchen. However, the oxygen inside the ship continued to deplete as the days passed. Even as his vision began to blur, Harrison never gave up the fight for survival. In the dark, airless environment, his thoughts started to become increasingly muddled. He didn't know how much time had passed, but he remained focused only on survival. Many people might have given up in such a situation, but Harrison continued to carry the hope of surviving with every breath. It was impossible for him to step outside the confined space. On one side, the ship's metal structure occasionally creaked under the pressure of the rising water, and the ocean seemed to be trying to swallow him at any moment. The narrow space where Harrison was trapped was like his last hope. Every moment, the water rose higher and the oxygen continued to deplete. There was only one thing left: to resist with all his might to survive in that cramped space. Mentally, he was beginning to wear down. But there was only one chance: a miracle. And that miracle would come in an unexpected form of salvation. Harrison O'Keen had stepped into a dark world after the sinking of the Sunken 4. The ship had capsized, rapidly sinking into the depths of the ocean, and Harrison was trapped in the kitchen. The fear he initially felt was like a nightmare, overwhelming and catastrophic. The moment when the crashing waves caused the ship to capsize and dragged Harrison into a massive void might have been the scariest moment he had ever felt in his life. The dark waters, the roar of the wind, and the screams of the panicked crew disappeared in an instant. But Harrison had miraculously survived. He was buried in the darkness of the narrow space he was trapped in. He had lost all sense of time and space. Everything around him was uncertain, and everything was slowly sinking into the water. In the first hours, fear and panic had dominated, and focusing on survival had been difficult. He found himself surrounded by cold water in an airless environment, trapped and unsure of what to do. As the ship sank, he tried to move through the water, at times holding his breath as the oxygen started to run out. In that cramped space, there was only darkness. As the ship began to sink further, the water level rose higher every minute. At first, Harrison could think only of escape. But as time went on and his chances of survival decreased, fear gave way to despair. His thoughts became more confused and blurry. He began to think that he would likely take his last breath in this dark environment, and that no one would ever find him. Many times, thoughts of his loved ones crossed his mind. Is my family safe? They might have lost their lives too, he thought. In that moment, the people in his life, his loved ones, his mother, father, friends, and companions, suddenly seemed like distant, fading dreams. His vision blurred, and the voices around him seemed to grow more and more distant. The only thought in O'Keen's mind was death and loss. The fear of death engulfed him as everything around him was disappearing. As the water rose, each passing minute felt like a lifetime, and time was quickly running out. Every moment, he felt like he might drown, and his hopes of survival seemed to be dwindling. Harrison could hear the roar of the water flowing like a river, but this roar echoed inside him like a threat. As the ship sank completely, he didn't even know if there was any other crew member alive. The thought of whether anyone else was still alive was hard to even entertain, because everything had happened so quickly that it was impossible to understand what was going on. In those moments, he lived with the fear that both he and the other crew members might have been lost in the ocean. He wondered how being alone in the water and darkness could scare a person so much. Time and time again, there was only one question in his mind: why did I survive? While searching for an answer to this question, he was caught in an emotional turmoil, mixing his desire to see his loved ones one last time with the sadness of having to say goodbye. In the dark environment, he felt increasingly alone with each passing minute. But one thing was certain: he was determined to survive. He understood the value of every breath, feeling as though each second was the last moment of his life. After the ship sank, everything around him became eerily silent. Neither the ocean waves nor the creaking of the ship's metal could be heard. He could only hear his own breathing. Each breath seemed to carry hope for survival. In the midst of all the darkness, he occasionally fought to stop the water from entering, carefully struggling to resist. Only his instincts remained. The drive to survive forced him to persist in that cramped space. He oscillated between fear and despair. On one hand, the thought of death haunted his mind, while on the other, the survival instinct was so strong that he couldn't give up. However, not succumbing to despair made him understand the deeper meaning of life. This was not just a fight for survival, but also a confrontation with life itself. Harrison's fear would eventually give way to something different. In that dark, narrow space, his determination to survive began to transform into inner strength. With each passing minute, the hope of taking one more step emerged. In the dark environment, each breath began to grow stronger, becoming more like a cry for help that could save him. Harrison O'Keefe's fight for survival seemed almost like a dream by the end of the second day. The dark world, the cold waters, the depleting oxygen, and every hopeless moment were becoming intertwined in his mind. But a miracle was about to happen. Deep in the wreckage of the Sunken 4, a rescue team had discovered Harrison's life. By this point, the news had spread worldwide that one of the 12 missing crew members was alive, but no one knew how difficult and surprising this miraculous survival was. After the ship capsized, underwater rescue teams immediately sprang into action. However, the depths of the ocean and the wreck of the sunken ship made the search extremely challenging. When the ship sank, no one managed to surface, and most of the crew had either fallen into the water and disappeared or had been trapped inside the ship and did not survive. Only Harrison remained. But how would he be found? Trapped in that narrow kitchen area, facing rising water, this man was surviving against all odds with a miraculous will to live, but no one knew he was there. For the first 2 days, the rescue teams were unable to reach the depths of the sea. The wreckage of the ship was vast, and every corner made it difficult for the teams to reach it. Almost everything inside the wreck was submerged in water, but an underwater rescue vehicle discovered that one of the missing crew members was alive, someone who had been unaccounted for after the accident. It was Harrison. An underwater rescue vehicle succeeded in reaching the wreckage of the sunken ship by the 3rd day after the accident. During the scans of the wreck, signs of life were detected in a narrow kitchen area at one corner of the ship. Often, such rescue operations in the deep ocean were unsuccessful, but this time something was different. In the kitchen, there was a man who had not been submerged and was fighting to survive. The discovery by the rescue team was astonishing. How could such a survival story unfold in such an unexpected and miraculous way? Harrison's ability to survive in such a harsh environment was incredibly surprising to the rescue team. When the team realized that Harrison was alive, everyone's eyes widened in disbelief. In a wreck where he was known to be the only survivor, even the slightest sign of life meant great hope. When the rescue vehicle succeeded in entering the sunken wreckage of the ship, definitive proof that Harrison was alive was obtained. While O'Keefe was trapped inside the wreck, the rescue teams immediately began to intervene. Not only was he the sole survivor, but rescuing the only crew member who had managed to survive for so long was a critical moment. Harrison's survival was not just a matter of luck, but also a testament to determination, resilience, and a human's struggle against the power of nature. At that time, Harrison's condition was still extremely critical and life-threatening. Being pulled out of the shipwreck deep in the ocean was a crucial step for him to continue living. The air in the narrow kitchen area was nearly exhausted. The team worked quickly to safely lift Harrison to the surface. However, this rescue operation was just as complex. The ship was very deep, and each step involved more risk. Harrison's ability to survive for so long depended not only on his inner strength and determination, but also on the swift actions of the rescue team and their ability to take the right steps. As the rescue teams brought Harrison to the surface after his challenging but successful fight for survival, they managed to bring him to safety. Harrison's life, which had been trapped for many hours in the wreck, completely changed in that moment. All the fear, despair, and loneliness were over once the rescue team found him. The efforts to keep him alive were truly extraordinary. Harrison's life had once again begun anew. After 3 terrifying days since the sinking of the Jascon 4, Harrison O'Keefe had become the target of a rescue operation that would reshape his life. Every passing hour in the sunken wreck reduced Harrison's chance of survival, physically and mentally draining him. But a miracle appeared at the last moment, perhaps even in the last second through a submarine rescue operation. That moment marked a historic turning point in both Harrison's and the rescue team's lives. This event turned into an inspiring survival story for viewers around the world, showing just how extraordinary it was to survive in the depths of the ocean. The rescue operation was undoubtedly not easy. The Jascon 4 ship was deep in the ocean, sunken, and the crew members who hadn't been heard from in days were still inside. The rescue teams were searching every corner of the wreck, trying various methods to get inside. In such a vast and complex area, each step involved huge risks. However, the underwater rescue vehicles managed to reach the wreck at a specific point. At that point, a sign of survival was detected, indicating that Harrison, the only survivor, was alive. When the ship sank, Harrison had managed to find the least submerged area, staying in a narrow space for 3 days. However, every second spent trying to prevent the water from entering was physically and psychologically destroying him. The depletion of oxygen in that small area and the increasing strain on his body indicated that he was in an extremely tough situation. When the rescue team found Harrison, seeing him alive was undoubtedly surprising for everyone. Reaching the depths of the wreck and confirming he was alive turned the operation into a race against time. When the rescue team found Harrison, they felt a great sense of relief. The expected outcome had not been reached. Finding Harrison alive was an incredible success. However, immediately after this success came the big questions. How had Harrison managed to survive underwater for so long? And now, how much time did they have to safely rescue him? O'Keefe, in his fight for survival, was undergoing a tremendous test both physically and psychologically. His body had been greatly affected by the cold and oxygen deprivation. Spending such a long time in a dark, airless environment had brought about both mental and physical destruction. Harrison was finally pulled from the sunken wreckage of the ship with the help of the rescue team. Although he was alive, the effects of being trapped in such a small space for so long made it difficult for him to move. The rescue team gently and carefully removed him from his position. The first thing that needed attention were the swelling in his body and signs of severe hypothermia. As he was taken into the submarine rescue vehicle, Harrison's body was almost motionless, but he was still alive. The team moved quickly and cautiously at every step to ensure he could make it to the surface. Knowing how critical time was, they acted swiftly to prevent Harrison from facing further distress. Another miraculous survival had occurred. When Harrison was brought to the surface, no one could believe he was alive. Everyone was in shock. The fact that a man who had spent 3 days in dark, cold waters was still alive was an almost impossible reality. Throughout this time, Harrison had never lost hope in surviving, even as he faced the risk of drowning. After this incredible rescue story, Harrison had to start a new life. not only physically but also psychologically. The rescue operation was not just a technical success. It was also proof of the strength of the human spirit. Harrison's resilience, survival instinct, and the timely intervention of the rescue team who found and extracted him were heard all over the world. This event became an unforgettable story, showing how a person can face immense challenges and still manage to survive. What Harrison O'Keefe experienced was not just a rescue operation, but a symbol of a person pushing beyond their physical and psychological limits. During those 3 days, Harrison not only survived, but, by never losing hope and relying solely on his resilience and inner strength, managed to save his life. This story has become a source of inspiration around the world, and with each passing year, the tale of this miraculous survival from the depths of the ocean continues to symbolize the power of the human spirit. Harrison O'Keefe's fight for survival. In the deep ocean, trapped in the wreck of the Sunken 4 for 3 days, became an unforgettable story not only for him but for the entire world. The extraordinary rescue after the sinking of the Sunken 4 attracted the attention of media outlets worldwide, turning his struggle for survival into a rare heroic tale in human history. This event was not just the story of one man's survival, but also a reminder of how resilient the human spirit can be and of the value of every moment of life. After the rescue operation, Harrison was immediately taken to the hospital. He had endured severe physical and psychological trauma. The time he had spent in a dark, cold, and confined space with oxygen deprivation for 3 days had left deep marks on his body. His body temperature had dropped significantly due to prolonged exposure to cold water, and his muscles and bones were weakened. The effects of remaining immobile for so long caused muscle spasms and trembling. At the same time, he was also experiencing severe psychological trauma, carrying the emotional scars of fear and loneliness. However, Harrison's survival was not just a physical struggle, it was also a mental battle. After the ship sank, while grappling with fear and despair, he found a deep inner strength and held on to it to survive. He faced solitude, darkness, rising waters, and a race against time for 3 days. During this time, his mind underwent as much of a test as his body. There were moments when he thought he wouldn't make it, but in the darkness, he searched for a glimmer of hope. At some point, he clung to his survival instincts and held on to every second. Finally, when the rescue team found him and brought him to the surface, it was not just a survival story, but a symbol of a man's battle with darkness and a reminder of the preciousness of life. Harrison's rescue created a huge global stir. The media followed this extraordinary rescue with great curiosity, and the survival story from the depths of the sea became an inspiring example. In an interview, O'Keefe shared his experiences with people around the world, advising them never to lose hope no matter what. His story demonstrated how powerful the survival instinct can be, even in a life filled with difficulties. However, behind Harrison's rescue story was not only a process of physical recovery, but also a profound inner transformation. He rediscovered himself as a man who had spent 3 days alone in that narrow kitchen area. He saw it as a fight for survival, and this battle gave him a new perspective on life. The events he experienced taught him, beyond survival, a deeper understanding of the true meaning of life. He realized that challenges and losses could always be a part of life, but they could not destroy a person's love for life. After those dark and fear-filled days, Harrison O'Keefe reshaped his life. From that day on, he began to cherish every moment more. The day he was saved became a passion as significant as survival itself. Having overcome difficulties and faced death, he moved forward with the understanding of how precious every moment of life truly was. Although his physical recovery process was slow, he worked to overcome the psychological trauma he had endured. Long periods of isolation and fear had left lasting effects on him, but the survival instinct and determination gave him the strength to overcome these challenges. Mentally, after the dark days he had lived through, he realized something. No matter how difficult, every new day was a gift, and every new breath was a miracle. He no longer saw what he had experienced as trauma, but as an experience that had strengthened his bond with life. Harrison O'Keefe's survival story became not just a physical rescue, but also a powerful example of how a person's passion for life can be reinforced and how one can stand strong in the face of adversity. Every moment he lived changed his outlook on life, and this extraordinary experience made him more determined not just to survive, but to truly live. Today, Harrison O'Keefe inspires many as a symbol of survival. He did not only survive for 3 days at the depths of the ocean, but also showed the world how powerful the human spirit can be, how valuable life is, and the importance of appreciating every moment. O'Keefe's survival story will remain a significant example in history, helping people find the strength within themselves